the next session is together with Gregor Jarisch and Loisos Michael. I hope that's correctly pronunciation. Gregor is the founder of Eddy, which is an open source chat platform, and also one of the participants in the Edubots consortium. Um, and he will start with a presentation about building likable chatbots. Welcome, Gregor. Are you here?
Yes, I'm here.
Fantastic. How are you today?
Pretty good. A long day, but a lot of great presentations and working on the side, listening to all the great talks, and yeah, really impressed by all the knowledge that have been generated over the years. I remember back when I started in 2006, there were basically very little knowledge about how to do chatbots well, and then in 2016, when there was the bubble coming up, still a lot of people, it was more marketable, more for the mainstream, but still very little knowledge, and it's impressive how much knowledge were gained and research done in the last few years.
Yeah, I agree. And also Aloysius, perhaps you can turn on your camera and say hi here.
Yes, hello everyone. Nice to be here.
Nice to have you here. So, do you remember your first chatbot experience?
Well, I'm working actively now on chatbots, not in an educational setting though. So we are building a chatbot for us as a cognitive assistant to help people with everyday tasks. And we are still at the early stages because our focus was mostly on understanding the formal basis before we actually get to develop something. So I'll be sharing some of that during the presentation.
Okay, great. And before we start that, want to remind everyone that feel free to ask questions in the chat and raise your hand in case there's any questions. We try to keep this as a quite informal format, and we hope that there will be a lively community discussion here. And after this session, we will wrap up the conference for today with a final concluding remarks at 4 o'clock approximately. All right. So with that, I'll give the floor to Gregor.
Thank you very much. I assume you can see my slide, the art of building likable chatbots.
We do, but not in presentation mode.
Great. So a little bit about myself first. My name is Gregor Jarisch. I have invented the open source chatbot framework called Eddy. It's an open source platform that allows you to build all kinds of different chatbots, multiple chatbots if you want. I'm also the CTO of Differ, helped creating Bo, and Eddy is sort of the underlying framework that helped achieve a lot of tasks that Bo is capable of doing today. If you want to check out either of these, feel free to visit these websites.
Sorry, Gregor, I don't think we're not unsure if, yeah, okay. I think we'll see your screen now.
Okay, haven't you seen my screen yet?
Yes, but just not in full presentation mode. If you.
Okay, let me try one more time. Perhaps just full screen, that make it easier. Thank you for letting me know. How about now?
Yep, perfect.
Perfect, all right. So I would like to start out with a superficial approach of what it makes to have a chatbot likable in the end. So I think there are 4 very important aspects to it. The very first thing is, once you have a chatbot, make sure it's easy to find and access. That might seem to be obvious, but I have seen a lot of projects that were thinking that through way too late. And in the end, it's very important that you have something, whether it's a great solution or a mediocre solution, but it needs to be able to be findable by users. That means you need to have active communication with your users, introduce it one way or the other, have it accessible on their usual journeys. So whenever they are on your website or inside your learning management system, it should be an obvious way how to use your chatbot. Purpose and capabilities needs to be clear. That is something that basically refers to, first of all, are you communicating well at the beginning what the chatbot is made for and what it's trying to solve? And also, how many things are you trying to solve at once versus do you stay lean and try to solve one particular thing, but that in a very clear way and without any misunderstanding to the users what the chatbot might be capable of. The third thing is it should look trustworthy and inviting. And by that, when I say look, it's obviously not really meant about how the conversation will be like and how you design the chatbot and like the voice of tone and the usage of words and phrases, but it's really more the visual appearance of it. I remember there was a study done by Sintef, and if I recap correctly, especially when you haven't talked to the chatbot yet, then the visual appearance is very much the only indicator what the chatbot might be is for or capable of doing, versus once you start chatting with it, the importance of the character loses a little bit. But in the beginning, when it's about the introduction and about will you sort of give it your trust, a nice looking chatbot experience will help a lot. And then what kind of user interface are you using? Is it the classical right corner chatbot bubble that pops up on the website and asks you if you need any help? Or is it a more advanced interface? Or is it perhaps a regular chat like WhatsApp or Telegram in which your chatbot is embedded in? And then there is sort of the experience-wise aspect of a likeable chatbot. So this is more going into the conversation itself. And here I find these four things relevant. First of all, the quantity. When you design a chatbot for the very first time, you tend to over-communicate. Communicate a lot, as much as possible. Just pack a lot of information into sometimes one message, which turn out to be a wall of text. Just to make sure you have communicated everything that might be important for the user. But that actually backfires immensely because once you have too much text in front of you, too many messages once, people tend to just overfly them or at worst don't read them at all. So you want to communicate as informative as required, but definitely not more. And the less, the better. But of course, it needs to make sense what you're communicating. The next thing is the quality. Quality means that a chatbot should only confirm something it is sure of. When it has creating something, you should make sure the creation of whatever you created really worked. Or that when the user said something, you can be really sure you understood what the user said. And it's not like randomly, okay, I understood you. But later in the conversation, it's very clear that the chatbot clearly did not understand you. The next one is the relation. So the sort of the nice feeling to it. Very often it makes sense to not be only effective in terms of trying to be really down to the task and be very effective on how you want to solve the problem the user is facing. But sometimes it makes sense to add a sentence or two about the situation the user is in. For instance, if you would have a chatbot and it's about to remind people about an upcoming exam, then it might be nice to have a sentence like, "Oh, this might be a stressful time for you, and it's the same for everyone else. Don't be scared. Reach out for help if you need something," like that, in order to make sure the user feels welcome, but also feel a sense of, okay, the chatbot knows in what kind of situation I am. Context is key. So ideally, you would want to know in what kind of phase the student is in, or what the student has already done before, or the user in general. And therefore have this kind of relational phrases or sentences or communication in the end in a way that really makes sense, not just at the beginning, but also over the course of the time. And the last one is quite clear: stay brief, stay relevant, and always be polite. I think that's one of the really great aspects of a chatbot. You can't really annoy it. I mean, unless it is programmed to be annoyed at some point, that could be a design choice. But really, I think the good stuff is whether you write it at 3 o'clock in the morning, whether you write to it in a moody way, it is always there to help you and should always try to be polite in the way it communicates, and of course honest, because every lie or every fake of "I understood you" and in the end you don't, will backfire. So to go a little bit deeper into these different aspects, so discoverability, sort of how can you find a chatbot? And of course, the most useless chatbots are those that never be found and never be used. And no matter how much effort you put into it, they are not used because nobody knows about them and eventually don't care. And I think here there is a lot of marketing efforts to be done, communication efforts in the beginning when you introduce a chatbot, not only to new students, but also to current students who have been there before a new system were introduced, and make sure you really make them understood what that chatbot is made for, what kind of problems it should solve, how to access it, and really make it interesting and make people curious to find your chatbot and be able to communicate with it. Having some small introduction videos about 1 minute seemed to be a great choice to help get a good idea of what's going on with the chatbot. And of course, it depends sort of on what channels you have your chatbot. So we have seen multiple cases. So there are chatbots that are integrated into current software or websites. Here it's very important that it's clearly indicator where you can access the chatbot. And on the other hand, then there you have perhaps a chatbot on WhatsApp, Telegram, or any other messaging channels. You might believe, well, people are going to find your chatbot, but it's just an endless amount of chatbots and other users, and chances that they stumble upon it is really low. So that means here again, you will have to make the extra effort to introduce it to your students in order to make sure they understand that it exists and also how to use it. The purpose and the capabilities, so basically the scope of the chatbot, is very important, and not just that you as a chatbot developer or creator or university who wants to create one, but from the standpoint of a student or user. So these questions will be basically the questions a user will have first when they get into touch with a chatbot, whether it's just the discoverability phase of, hey, I understand there is something that is there for me, but especially when they start using it. So the who are you is clear. What is the chatbot? Then what can it do for me? Sort of the purpose of it, the scope, the capabilities of it. The why should I care is always the relation to the user itself. So what kind of problem as I have as a user that the chatbot might be able to solve. If there is a mismatch where the chatbot explains a problem solution to me that doesn't feel like it would be anything I need to have as a problem or need to be solved, then there is probably a mismatch here. But it could be also good because I wouldn't, as a user, waste much more time dealing with the chatbot. The next one, the how should I feel about you, is really a bit drawn from the pure logical analytic of the chatbot towards the more emotional. When I look at it, do I feel I trust it? And it's not just about what kind of chatbot phase you have. It's about the entire surrounding. Who is offering the chatbot? How was it introduced to me? Do I feel, is it perhaps taking a lot of personal information, or is it really rather a superficial thing where I feel safe and don't feel I will be exposed at some point? Which also plays into why should I trust you? Is that something that has been randomly made by anyone in the world and you don't know what it is made for? Is it for data collection or whatever else? Or is it perhaps an official source by my university where I know, okay, well, I pay them, the university itself is trustworthy, therefore I assume the bot will be too. And then last but not least, very important, once you sort of have decided, okay, I'll give it a try, it seems to be something useful for me, then it should be a clear, okay, how can I use it? What is the next step to really get into this entire conversation? Now we go into the looks and inviting trustworthiness part. So as I mentioned before, the visual appearance of the chatbot is very important, especially in the beginning. So it's a bit about expectation management, but definitely about the pure emotional feeling of gaining trust and gaining excitement and interest in trying something out that you haven't used before. And here we have two different versions of chatbots. One you probably have seen when you have joined this already, Bo, and the second one is from a different project called Utwindy. Again, here quite simple figures, but yet they should transport certain emotions. They should transport a certain sense of human-centered emotions where you feel a relationship to it, although you understand it's a computer and although you understand it's not human, but still might be able to deal with the emotions that arise. User interface. So there, pragmatically speaking, there are two choices here. One choice, I think JJ said it before, Telegram or WhatsApp is a very good way to get going for simple use cases, especially when you want to get to a solution quite fast, when it's about prototyping, these kind of things. But also when you have a lot of your users already on these platforms, and that's already sort of the channel you communicate with them, then that's likely a good choice because the low barrier, it's quite easy to implement, and you don't have to deal with user interface aspects of it because the user interface is there already. But that's also, in my opinion, a bit of a downside because you have to stick with whatever the user interface is giving to you. And if you have other ideas, then you are not really capable of doing anything like that. So, for instance, in a regular chat, WhatsApp or Facebook Messenger, if you would have to have a bit more interesting user interface element, for instance, you would like to help a user select the date or something else, and you would just show him sort of a calendar pop up and they can easily select it. In a regular chat, that won't be possible, and therefore sometimes it's quite inconvenient transferring or choosing a certain user input, user data to be sent to the users if you don't have full control over user interface. Then on the other hand, if you build it on by yourself, then you have the possibility that you can really fit the case. So whatever type of chatbot you're building, you can really try to tailor-made it to, on the one hand, the use case itself, on the other hand, to the environment it is running in. So whether it's a learning management system or separate website, or it's an entire chatbot by its own, you can really make sure the look and feel and also the way it's working fits the requirements well. The downside of it is a substantial amount of more work, especially user interface, because very often you have to start from scratch, especially like in our case with Differ, you would want to have a little bit of a different user interface that goes away from the regular chat user interfaces you see with most chatbots out there. But on the other hand, it's really for the very first bot that you do. So once you have the user interface sort of done, then you can create all kinds of bots, or in our case, different bot conversations that will help you split up and extend the chatbot further without altering the user interface too much. And you still have the advantage of always be able to change the user interface to your needs whenever needed. So in a chatbot conversation, and I would say rather than an entire chatbot experience that sort of goes from the very beginning, you are dealing the very first time with it towards the longer time you use it. There are four essential phases that make a good chatbot experience. The first one is clear. It's an introduction. Here you want to leave a positive initial impression, and you want to make sure it stays interesting. It needs to be obviously a fit between what the chatbot offers and what the user has as a problem to be solved or as a need in one way or the other. And if you're not be able to encourage the trust that the data is safe and the trustworthiness is there, usually by the original discovery things you did, but also by the tone of voice you use in the chatbot conversation, then it likely will stop there and the user won't use it again. Orientation is another very important aspect because you don't want to oversell. You don't want to give the impression that your chatbot can do much more than it is actually capable of. So sort of establishing boundaries of the system in the beginning is very important. And that doesn't mean necessarily only by language that you tell exactly the user what the chatbot is there for, but it could be also by the user interface. For instance, in Bo, we have chosen, at least for the current phase, to be a click bot. So basically you have multiple choice options that will guide you through the different conversation paths. And that also sort of can establish a certain boundary of the system if you just have a user interface that explains it by itself, what is possible, what is not, in addition to the language the bot is using. Then you have the actions, the set of tasks that are supposed by the system. So that's really, what is the chatbot capable of doing? How can I do them? And is the chatbot sort of telling me how to do it? Usually you have a task. So in Differ, it could be creating a community, creating FAQs, splitting users up in small groups. And that usually multiple stop conversations. So you will have a couple of interaction back and forth in order to have some question answered by the user before you actually can accomplish this action. And guidance in the end is very important. If you just believe the user will know what to say, then it's in probably 99% of the cases the wrong choice. The user will very often not know what to say, or will be hesitated. Okay, what exactly am I supposed to do now? So it's always important to guide the user by explaining what they're supposed to do, what kind of input you're expecting from them, also what they can expect after they have done the action. Very often people are scared of doing something wrong or doing something that cannot be changed afterwards, and that's why it's very important before you do a certain action, especially if it cannot be reverted, that you let the user know what's going to happen. Here's a book recommendation. If you want to get a bit deeper into this entire non-technical but very important aspect of chatbot development, the conversational design, I can recommend the book from Erica Hall, The Conversational Design, from A Book Apart. Very good. Everybody who deals with chatbot should have this book in their shelf. So what's a good formula for creating a chatbot? So imagine you want to have a great chatbot, and you said, okay, I'm convinced I want to do this now. How can we move forward? So it's important that the chatbot or the solution or to a problem, or let me rephrase it in another way, the chatbot should be able to solve something where a problem already existed before. It's way too hard to create a problem and the solution and the chatbot on top of it that make it successful. It's much better to look for problems users already have and then try to solve it with the chatbot. It should be clear. It should not have, like, for instance, the chatbot we building Bo is called the social chatbot, and it sort of gives a direction. It gives an idea what is a social chatbot. But then on the other hand, you want to make sure it's not doing something completely off the record that doesn't make sense in this scoping. And in the end, small and simple, I think that's a thing that goes for a lot of software development aspects, but definitely for chatbots. If it's small and simple to use, you will have a much higher success rate, other than it's very complicated and perhaps might have problems in a certain paths in the conversation. So when you're developing a chatbot, there is this classical aspect that you need to create value in the beginning. And I think that's the most important aspect, because often chatbots are decided by somebody who pays for it, or decided by somebody who wants to make sure we have it, just to make sure innovation is sort of checked off as a checkbox. But you want to make sure from a user perspective that the chatbot really creates value for them, because otherwise it doesn't matter how good it looks or how nice it communicates. If the value is not there, it won't work. Estimatable is very important. That also connects a little bit to keep it small. If you have a small set, really a small use case, then you can estimate it, and then it will be much easier to sort of make sure you have a budget for it that actually fits the entire development lifecycle. And then testability is also very important. Over the time, you will build more chatbots, perhaps, or more chatbot conversations, and you want to make sure you don't break anything you have done before. So an easy way to test chatbots might be a really good thing to have. So how to motivate people to use your chatbot? I think that's a very crucial aspect. There's something called the human-centered design, where you really want to make sure the chatbot does something that intrinsically motivates people. So that could be there's an assignment coming up and you need help, and the chatbot helps you find someone, or it's about the chatbot reminds you about stuff to be done, or there are many other use cases. But it needs to be something where you have an intrinsic motivation that needs to be solved, that the chatbot can do. If it's sort of an external reward where you're getting some stuff when you use the chatbot that might work at the beginning, but you will have a low retention rate on these kind of mechanisms. So we had that a little bit before, but just a little bit of a different perspective. The different phase is through a user journey on your product. So you have the discovery phase, the onboarding, the scaffolding, which I'm going to in a bit, and the end game. So discovery is clear. What would the user even try out the product? So what are the motivators here behind it? And very often in the beginning, explaining too much won't really create interest. It's actually the other way around, a certain unpredictability or creating a certain type of curiosity by not saying everything, but just a few bits and pieces of what it is might make people curious and want to check it out. And then there's the other thing to it. You know that the chatbot is solving a particular problem for you that's really something you want to be solved, then the impatience or scarcity that you cannot do it without it might help people to jump on your solution. The onboarding phase is quite clear. You want to make sure people understand the scope of the product, and you want to make sure functionality is clear. And here, accomplishments in the beginning are very important. So if a user fails in using your chatbot because they don't type the right things, or they don't know where to click, or there are constant errors, then they feel a lack of accomplishment, and they will feel they are either too dumb, or the system is too dumb, or whatever is dumb. But point being, they won't be happy and likely not continue. And development here is meant that you sort of build up a certain either data by sharing information with the chatbot, or creating stuff with the chatbot that gives us a sense of moving forward. Scaffolding. Scaffolding is basically, once you understood what sort of the main function, the main purpose of this chatbot, what else can it do for me after I have done it? And that is often related to retention. So if you only have one single thing that is useful once, then you have the chance that people are not coming back. But if you have other things that might be useful apart from the main functionality under a different settings, then you can have the chance that people will use it on a regular basis. And here are different motivators. Again, development, accomplishment, and power of creativity. So do you offer in your chatbot the ability to go different ways, or formulate different things, or really drive the conversation in a direction that is not totally predefined? Is the chatbot giving you great feedback or general feedback about how you're doing or what else you can do? And do you feel a certain ownership and possession over the things you are achieving or creating with the chatbot? And social influence relatedness is often the aspect of, for instance, with Bo, when Bo is connecting different students to each other, and that works well, and you really get to know someone, then you feel, okay, Bo is a good facilitator or whatever else, and that would fall under that category. And the end game is really, when the user have tried everything, why would they continue using your product? And I think there is really the quality and the in the end, intrinsic value of the solutions you're giving. If you're not able to do this, then people will, at the very end, stop using your product because they have just tried everything and sort of feel they have known everything that is there to explore. And here, and you can see social media is really good at it, empowerment of creativity, but also loss of avoidance, many likes, many friends, all these kind of things play a big role here. And also in the chatbot, if you start sort of to building something up, whether it's you have a conversation or even a relationship with your chatbot, and you don't want to lose it by not continuing a conversation, you might have a really good chance that they continue using your chatbot. So usually when you have a chatbot, and from a developer point of view or a company that created, you do have a business metric. And in a university sense, you would have probably metrics like you want to reduce dropout rate, you want to increase engagement, these kind of things. And that's all okay, but you need to understand that business metrics, users don't really care about what kind of business metrics you have. So they care about their desired action, and they want to win. Win meaning they want to accomplish what they came for, they want to solve the problem that they had in mind to be solved by the bot. And of course, the desired action will impact the business metric, but this yet alone won't work at all. What you need, on the one hand, feedback mechanism, but first of all, to sort of give the user understanding what can be done and what kind of actions can be used, but also like the incentivation. So the entire feel good around it, the ease of use, the effectiveness of it, all kinds of little aspects that sometimes don't build entire feature by itself yet, but sort of contribute to the overall experience, will help massively with this. Another book recommendation here, this is about gamification. Another word for it is human-centered design, which works much better here, can be used for other product developments as well, but I found it to be very crucial for chatbot development as well. I would recommend you buying this book and read on it. It opens the eyes in many aspects. Last few slides, building chatbots for university. We said it already before, keep it small and simple. I think that's something just to keep in mind, especially when you think about huge creations and huge challenges. It's nevertheless how huge it might be in the end. It should always start small and simple and better reduce complexity. Automating conversations that the user already have. So when you think about all kinds of conversations users have with each other, like students with each other, or students to educators, or educators with each other, or staff with educators, think about which of these are kind of annoying or useless time of labor, and which of them could be potentially automated. Those are usually good starting points. And make early user testings. Just because you like it and you believe it's a good idea doesn't mean your users believe so too. So it's usually a good idea to have it tested by the end users. The perfect development team. You need to have at least a chatbot developer or two that ideally have some experience with natural language processing or some of the tools that are available on the market. Then I usually suggest to have a separate person that deals with the dialogue, so writing the entire answers and the structures and these kind of things. Usually it's good to sort of divide these into two people, into basically two roles, because technical people tend to not really have a nice way of formulating the sentences in the chatbot. So the chatbot experience is usually a bit not that straightforward in terms of language. So that's why you would have somebody that emphasizes on communication and has perhaps a background in behavioral psychology. And in the end, you also want to have sort of a chatbot product owner that makes sure business metrics are made, features are prioritized, and the right things are developed. Last slide. We are going to make a hackathon for students, about students. It's how to make students' life easier. That's the topic of the hackathon. We'll start tomorrow. It will end on Friday. It's a 3-day hackathon. It's the third edition of our hackathon. One has been made in Manhattan in 2019 and one in Vienna in 2018, which were great successes. We will provide chatbot technology as well as mentors, so students, computer science students, are not left out if they have any questions. I'd be happy if you happen to know any computer science students, if you let them know about the chatbot hackathon. We still have some open spaces for tomorrow. Looking forward for a great event. If there are any questions, I'm happy to have